Front Row Rugby. Interviews with rugby legends with Peter Stemmet.
Our guest on Front Row Rugby today is Springbok legend, former fullback and World Cup winner, André Joubert. André, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, nice to be on your blog.
André, let's go back to 1992, South Africa returning to international rugby against the All Blacks. You weren't part of that squad. You only got your chance in 1993 against the Wallabies. How frustrating was that for you?
Yeah, it was a frustrating period. During that period, I actually had quite a few injuries. I actually played my first Springbok game in 1989, and subsequently after that, I went through a few injuries, and I picked up one major groin injury. While at those days we still played trials, and having it at Loftus, as I was taking a penalty kick, I tore my groin muscle. So I was out for 6 months, and obviously it was a long period for rehab and all that. So eventually I got back after 1992 and back, and in 1993 I was back on the tour to Australia. Yeah, so it was a difficult time, but you've got to work through those kind of difficulties, and then it always makes you a better player at the end of the day.
And then you stayed in the side pretty much all the way through to 1997. You were known in that time as the Rolls-Royce of fullbacks. How special was that period for you?
Yeah, no, it was a special period. As I said earlier, every player has got to go through the injuries, and I think if you work through injuries and you get to top level again, then you kind of set physically and mentally, to prepare for all kind of games lying ahead of you. I think people don't realize how many coaches I've been through. You're talking about that period. I think my first coach was Cecil Moss in 1989, and then from 93 onwards, I think it was Mac, and then after Mac came Kitch Christie, and then after Kitch Christie came Andre Markgraaf, Harry Viljoen, and Nick Mallet, and so I went through a few coaches, in my career. So I must say my career has been special from 1992 onwards until 1997. Yeah,
it really did feel like there was, or it was a case of a new year, a new Springbok coach in those days at some stage. André, let's go to 1995. It's the World Cup. It's in South Africa. Our opening match is against the Wallabies at Newlands. They are the defending world champions. How nervous were you guys leading into that match?
We were nervous, I must say. I still remember when we got off the plane there in Cape Town. You had the Kaapse Klopse, all singing for us and all celebrating, for celebrating the World Cup. So I must say we were quite nervous, but kind of a confident nervous. And so I think we prepared very, very well. We knew we were, and we knew that we were a very, very fit team. Our kids drilled us on running around the Joburg golf courses there. So fitness-wise, we were on top of the game, So I think at the end of the day, just how to kind of apply ourselves in the games lying ahead. And, I think as everybody know, we had a great start to the World Cup by beating the Aussies. I think they were number one at that stage convincingly, so it was a great start for us.
27-18, it was a great result, great start to the World Cup for the Boks, and then beating Romania and Canada after that, heading into the quarterfinals against, they were still called Western Samoa in those days, and you suffered quite a nasty hand injury in that quarterfinal. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, it was it was a quarterfinals against Samoa, and it was quite an open game, and I think those days, the high tackle was still legal. I think in the modern game there would have been quite a few red cards come into play in that game. And I think it happened at about 50 minutes into the game. I took I got a skip pass on the outside, and I went through the gap. And as I went through the gap, Jonah Lomu came and he gave me like a front arm high tackle, And as I ran with the ball, obviously his knuckles, his hand hit the back of my left hand, which broke the metacarpal in my left hand. But at that stage, your adrenaline is going, you're running, and after a while I felt, my finger was hurting a bit and I could push it, and then actually the bone was sticking out on the top. I strapped it up and tried to play a bit onwards, but then the doc said, listen, we better get this sorted out. And, as I came off the field, and then I realized that my hand was broken, and, obviously the first thing that came into my mind, my World Cup is over. And later that night, those days we were still having cocktails, and then there was a Dr. Mark Ferguson. He said, listen, come and see me the next morning. Let's see what we can do with your hand, and let's put a pin in and let's see how your hand reacts to it. Obviously, I went for operation at Sunday morning. I think the op was finished by 10 o'clock. And then I went back home to Durban, and because Kitch sent us all home. And then my hand was quite swollen, and with this pin obviously being inserted in it. And we got back on Tuesday back to Joburg, where we had our training. And then Kitch said, listen, as I walked into the team, we said, listen, Joubert, those days, to kill our time in the hotel, we played a lot of table tennis. So I said to Joubert, listen, you take a table tennis bat and start playing a bit of table tennis. So I held it, and I must say it felt quite comfortable, with a bit of pain, but it felt quite comfortable. And then Kitch said, okay, Joubert, you look okay. Get yourself ready. And but I think the key thing is my hand was quite swollen a bit, and those days there was a new technology that came to the fore. They called it the decompression chamber, where they kind of lower you like below sea level and then put a lot of oxygen through your system, which really helped a lot with the swelling. So I must say, and then obviously you knew what happened that Saturday when we started playing France.
Yeah, let's talk about what happened against France. I mean, that must be probably the wettest rugby field, certainly that I've seen, watching rugby as a fan over the years. I'm assuming that must be the wettest conditions that you've ever played in as well.
Definitely was. And, obviously wet conditions become quite difficult for fullback play, because fullback play comes more into play now. But before we got to the game, and as the clouds were opening up with the rain, and it just carried on raining, there was a guy from Ireland, I can't remember his name. He kind of said to me, he saw those days that I broke my hand, and I received the fax from him earlier in the week at the arriving at the hotel. Said, listen, they got a kind of hockey game there in Ireland where they use this kind of gloves, and you would like to send me one which will help your protection. And obviously I said, yeah, thank you very much. That'll be great. It'll definitely help with the bumps and bruises. And Saturday morning arrives, no glove yet. And as I can see, the time's running out. I haven't even had time to train with this glove. And eventually, this glove arrived at about 12:30 at the hotel. And I think we were leaving at 1:45, 2 o'clock for the game, because the game, I think it was at 3 o'clock. So eventually this glove arrived, and then I fitted it on, and it fitted like a real glove, as as you would say, and it was perfectly fit. And as you know, the game was delayed, I think, by an hour and a half. But, the guards are looking on to us, and we managed to pull that game off. And, while we're playing the game, and I remember in the first up and under, it was Thierry Lecroix and Philippe Selaire, on the first up and under. As I took the ball, the first thing they do, they didn't go for the ball. They just gone for my fingers just to try and pull it back and say, listen, we want the ball. So I said, well, if you want the ball that desperately, you can have it, But luckily it went our way, as I said earlier. The guards are looking onto us. They managed to pull that game off and gone through to the finals.
For sure. I'm quite interested in that story, because I think that from our point of view as fans watching back in 1995, the impression was always that the glove was part of the medical rehabilitation. So I suppose that if you had asked any of us, we would have been thinking, Andre just received the glove probably on the Monday ahead of the test match. So that's very interesting.
I think in a way, because it was such a major injury, but I knew I was at risk, and also putting my team at risk. So, every bit of help with, like, in terms of a glove did help, with the bumps against the hand. And it definitely gave me a bit more confidence, fielding the ball and passing the ball, and obviously to do some tackles. And it definitely certainly did give me a bit of confidence. But, it's amazing how strong the mind can be once you're given a second opportunity, how strong the mind can be over the matter. And, it really went our way. And that's why I keep on telling youngsters, it's not about the physicality at the end of the day, but it's all about the mind, how strong your mind is. And it's amazing how your mind can adapt to situations and make you really pull out some extraordinary events.
Absolutely. Now, in the week leading up to the final, as you well will remember, the media talk was all about Jonah Lomu. I'm interested to know, within the Springbok camp, how many discussions actually took place, particularly about Lomu?
Look, Jonah Lomu was an unbelievable player. I think worldwide, especially in that days, he was a top player, he was in top form. And I think every team feared him in some kind of way. But I think we were quite confident, because at that stage we actually had the best defensive record, because none of the big runners have ever scored against South African rugby. And I think South African rugby has always been known for their defence. And at that stage, Jonah Lomu has never scored a try. against South Africa, and even after the World Cup, he's never ever scored a try. So I think we had that kind of confidence that our defence was properly secured, but I think also we had it worked out that every ball or every play was around Jonah Lomu, and we knew, and Kitch was just very clever in that way. Say, listen, Jonah is going to receive the ball either the first phase or second phase, and we just had to kind of had him to cover him, and that's where he had Hughes and Mark Andrews just kind of ran that line and always made sure he didn't had any momentum picking up, because once he starts picking up momentum, then he can be devastating and destructive. But Hughes and Mark managed to stop him within 1 yard, and there was no momentum, which I think put the All Blacks on a bit of back foot, so they didn't have the front momentum. So that kind of was a bit of a disruption to the game plan.
André, it's interesting because obviously at the time it's about adrenaline and it's nerves, and I remember watching it as a little boy, and we were all sitting on the edges of our seats. But now, many years later, I've watched that match back, the final, quite a few times, and it's my opinion that the Springboks were actually quite comfortable in that match. To me, it looked like we were, I wouldn't necessarily say in control at all times, but it never really looked like we were second best on the day. I'm interested to know from you, how did you experience, how did it actually feel to you on the day in that situation?
Peter, when you come to finals, I think your defense is one of your best defensive mechanisms. And as I said earlier, our defense team, our defense was excellent, and we knew we had Jonah Lomu covered. And I think what helped us is that we played as a team. I think where the All Blacks were played around Jonah Lomu all the time, and we knew that we eliminate Jonah Lomu, that'll put them on a bit of back foot. And I think they were a bit, when it did happen, I think they were a bit put out of their guard. They were not easy and comfortable. They had to play a bit on the back foot, and I think that was a big disruption to them. Yeah, so we had a confidence in ourselves that, we've come so far, we've worked so hard, and also in front of your home ground, and Ellis Park has always been a good for us, and so we had that confidence that we can pull it off. I know we pushed it up to extra time, so it was, I think spectator-wise must have been, that next extra time minutes must have been the hardest thing to watch. But, as I said earlier on, I think we were very, very blessed, and we managed to pull off a great win for South Africa.
Something else that was brewing at the time was rugby being on the verge of moving from an amateur era into a professional one. We've read lots of stories about Francois Pienaar speaking to you guys about professional contracts. He wrote about it in his book, Rainbow Warrior, as well. André, from your perspective, how would you describe what was going on behind the scenes?
Pre-95, it was, rugby was still amateur, and obviously during the 95, and that's when we started hearing about things, it's going to change after the 95 World Cup and start kicking in 1996. But there's obviously Kerry Packer who kind of came up with this to be the disruption in amateur stages to make it professional. And we heard so many things, and at the end of the day, it was quite difficult because I think Kerry Packer approached a lot of our provincial teams, and then we were on the side of Louis Late, who was part of the Murdoch setup. So it was quite a split camp, and I must say, when after national or after being a training with the Springboks, when we arrived back at the Sharks back then, there was kind of a split camp because the Sharks wanted us to join them, but then we obviously were kind of forced to stay with relays. So there was quite a bit of difficulty during the training sessions, and it was a very, very difficult period. And but as the game had to turn professional, then it was still semi-professional, and as it has gone now fully professional. Those certainly semi-professional days was quite a big adaptation, so you don't know what to expect, what to do. I had to resign from my job because they were saying, listen, you're becoming a semi-professional rugby player now. So I couldn't put the hours back into my business back then or my job back then. And hence, that's when I started my own business back in 1996. And I realized, listen, I've got to start something now. In lieu of rugby, when it finished, at least I got something to fall back onto. So it was a very, very difficult time, very difficult decision times, because I could have resigned from my job and then break my leg in that first year. So it could have been difficult, but but it went my way. So I was very blessed.
Hey, if you're enjoying this video, why not hit the like button?
It was a difficult time also for the Springboks, obviously not 1995, but then in 1996, as we spoke a little bit earlier, new coach and all of that. Kitch Christie obviously had to resign for health reasons, and then Andre Markgraaff came in, and the Tri-Nations was at the time this brand new competition, and the Springboks didn't win many matches in the Tri-Nations, and then there was that series against the All Blacks straight afterwards, and many of the sort of score lines were quite close, but the Boks just couldn't quite get over the line until that final match against New Zealand at Ellis Park. And ultimately that meant that South Africa lost the series at home against New Zealand for the first time. Why do you think things went wrong for the Boks?
I think, first of all, when there's a change of coach, it's quite difficult. Obviously, a new coach comes in with his new ideas. He obviously wants to get his kind of players in the system. And you remember the relationship between a coach and players gets built over time. I think a coach can't just move in and kind of stamp down his kind of authority and his game plan. So I think in the beginning, a coach has just got to feel the players. And back then, I think that was one of the reasons, because of a new coach. So it's a new environment, new kind of game plan. And also, if you can look at the 1995 World Cup, there was quite a few older players in the system. I think I was the oldest actually. And post the 95 World Cup, those days we still had to play club rugby and provincial rugby. So we were never managed. I think a lot of injuries also stepped in. So a lot of key players were injured during that series. And I think that also had a huge impact on the result at the end of the day. And as you would know that, we lost the series. And looking at those score lines, they were very, very close at the end of the day. But I think that was always the thing between New Zealand and South Africa in that series when they toured here. Everything was very, very close, but at least we pulled off the last win at Ellis Park again. So managed to pull it off 2-1, to lose by 2-1.
At least ending on a high. So Andre, straight after that, there was a tour, 2 tests in Argentina, 2 against France, and then wrapping up the year in Wales. And of course, the bombshell was Andre Markgraaff dropping Francois Pienaar. How shocked were you by that?
I think the most important thing about rugby, especially in the professional era, there's got to be a relationship between the coach and the captain. And I think that was one of our success in the 1995 World Cup, because Kitch and Francois had a very good relationship. And I think in France was kind of like the intermediate between the team and the management. Look, the relationship between Andre and Francois, I don't know what there was, but I think what Nick was what Andre was looking for is to start rebuilding the Springboks with younger players. And I think that was maybe the initiative behind it, of dropping Francois and start looking at the younger generation to replace the older generation. So I think that was the reason for that.
Did you notice a different mood in the camp on that 96 tour?
No, I don't think so. I think that was actually a great tour. We beat the French. So, and it's always good to have young players coming in, and you still have to have the older guard around that. But it was a good blend that Andre picked, and it was a very, very successful tour. So it was a very good mood in the camp at the end of the day. I think if you win, then everything is good, but if you start losing, then everything can go bad. But I think we knew we had to start winning to make it a successful tour for us.
And how satisfying was the series win over the French?
Oh, it was excellent. I think, I can say I've never lost a game against the French. So it was a good win series for us in France. I think that's one of the most difficult places to go on tour. And I remember the French will put you in the center of Paris, but they'll put your training facilities about 2.5, 3 hours outside of Paris. So every morning we had to leave by 7 o'clock. And by the time you get back into your hotel, it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So it was a whole day excursion and a lot of traveling, to get to the field. So it was very, very difficult circumstances. But at the end of the day, it's all about winning on the field on a Saturday, which we pulled off.
Okay, Andre, I've read that Markgraaff promised you guys the week off if you beat the French in that series, and then obviously finishing off against Wales. Tell me about that last week before the Welsh test. How much fun did you guys have?
No, it was great fun, and I must admire Andre for keeping to his promise, because, us winning the series against France, that was our goal, to go and beat the French. And then, yeah, I think it wasn't actually against Wales. I think it was actually against the Irish, like, invitation team we had to come play our last game. But, you know, we were all partying that week, and I think we only had one training session. It was a Thursday. This is a warm-up before that game. But I think we lost that game, yeah. So it wasn't, it was still a close game, but it was, yeah, but we just went out to go and play some kind of barbarian running rugby. And it was a good festive game. I think at the end of the day, it wasn't a test match game. It wasn't tight and just kicking, but it was a really open kind of game, and I think it was most enjoyable for the crowd. So I think they had a great fun that week, the people watching that game.
And then we all know what happened with Mark Croft. He was then replaced by Carl du Plessis, who came in for the British and Irish Lions. We lost that series, as we now know. A lot of people felt at the time that it was a weak Lions squad, especially if you compare to the Lions teams that we've seen in 2009 and again in 2021 in South Africa. A lot of people think we should never have lost that series. What is your take?
Yeah, you know, again, there was a change of coaching within 1 year space. There was no time for a coach to start building a team. So we had new coaches coming in. They had to take over players. So they had to, and there was no time to kind of learn these players, to kind of understand what their weaknesses are, what their strengths were. So Carl and Gersmal were thrown straight into the deep. And it was very, very difficult. And I think at that stage, Carl and them were coaching Falls Bay Rugby Club. So for them, there was a straight leap from club rugby to test match rugby. You know, so it was quite a difficult or quite a massive leap, you know, in terms of coaching. And we as players felt, you know, look, they were exceptional rugby players, but I think they were still in the youth of their coaching career. So very, very inexperienced. And I must say the players were very not confident in a coaching style that was presented to them back then, you know. So, but as you know, we started off badly and then we lost the series, disappointingly. And I think one of the key things why we also lost the series because of the kicking between me and Henry Honeyball. We missed quite a lot of goal kicks. And I think that was one of the things. When you come to test match rugby, you know, kicking needs to be pinpoint if you want us to, if you want to win a series. So our kicking wasn't up to standard at that stage. And yeah, so it was a very, very difficult series. And then later, I think after in the Tri Nations, we started, then the tide started turning because that team went through a lot of critics. We lost quite a few games and we were criticised a lot. And I think the biggest turnaround is when we beat Australia in Pretoria with a massive score, I think of 63-21. And I think that was the first time that team ever started tasting victory. And as you know, after that, they got to win 19 games in a row. So I think any good team has to go through the doldrums to be criticised all the time. But once they start turning the tide and up curve, they're a very, very difficult team to win.
In that Tri Nations that you just mentioned, as you say, the Boks put 60 past the Wallabies. A couple of rounds before that, the All Blacks put 50 past South Africa. I think the score was 55-35. It's just interesting to me how you would have a competition between three teams that are, shall we say, relatively evenly matched, and yet you could still get such high scores. What do you think brings that about?
You know, any team works through peaks and troughs, you know, and I think at that stage, the All Blacks have built up, and then that day when they beat us 55-35, you know, we were kind of still building to try and achieve a win, so our confidence was very low, and the All Blacks have just peaked at the right time. And I think after that great loss, which we had there against All Blacks, then we just said, yeah, this is enough and enough. And as I said earlier, we just went on that upward, and I think we realized, listening, we've had enough pain now, been criticised enough, and then we were on that upward curve, and we hammered Australia, you know, by the same margin. But That's how rugby works. And, we beat Australia by 63-21. And funny enough, 2 years later, the Australians went to win the World Cup.
That test at Loftus that you mentioned when we put 60 past the Wallabies, as it turns out, that was your last test match for the Springboks. How disappointing was it for you that it ended there?
Yeah, look, I didn't thought it was going to end. And I thought I was still in the run because I still set my goal. Although I think I was 34 when then. And then I still had my mind set on the 1999 World Cup. But I was battling that stage with a right knee injury, which was kind of slowing me down. It was hampering me quite a bit. And obviously, on the year-end tour, it was Nick Mallet who got chosen as the head coach. And he came and saw me and he asked me, Joubert, can I please come on the tour on the NEHL? So he said, Nick, I really would love to, but unfortunately, I'm battling with a knee injury at the moment. I'd like to get it sorted out, have an op on it, and then I can be ready and start building myself for 1999. I think, obviously, I think Nick didn't like what I had to say, and I said, listen here. And then, as you know, he took Percy on the tour, and Percy had a very great tour. And I think since then, after that tour, Percy was selected to be the fullback.
That's exactly the way it worked out. In fact, as I recall, I actually think Justin Swart was playing fullback for Western Province in the Currie Cup winning side, with Percy at centre, and then Nick Mallet was the one that switched Percy to fullback, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's correct. I think Justin was in it, but then I think they moved into right wing. But at least I can say I gave Percy his first try in his Springbok career, because in that Australian match I gave him a long pass, which he ran right through the team, from the halfway line. So, no, but I think Percy also had a great Springbok career, which is great to see that he followed on afterwards.
Let's finish with a funny moment, a memorable moment from your time at the Springboks.
Well, I think the funniest moment I think I would recall is most probably, as I said earlier on, Nick Mallet was assistant coach to André Joubert on in Paris. And as I told you that, the bus trip to the training grounds took us about 2.5, 3 hours. And that morning, every morning before we left, we always had breakfast and then we had a cup of coffee. So we just thought, it would be a good initiation for Nick on this tour we could pull some kind of prank on him. So before we got onto the bus, we put a dormicum into his coffee. He obviously he finished his entire coffee, and then we got onto the bus. And then, as you know, dormicum, if things are slow, it kicks in very quickly. So Nick fell asleep, and we went to our training session. After we came back from our training session, we told Nick, "Now, come, Nick, we're going back now." And he obviously slept through the whole training session. So the dormicum did its work, and he missed his first training session. So he wasn't happy, but we all thought it was great. That's Nick's first initiation to the Springbok tour.
André, is that a normal thing that the players would initiate the coach?
No, well, he was assistant coach, so he was still there, so he wasn't the head coach, and I think we discussed it with André Joubert before, and he thought it was a great idea, so so it was with the blessing of André that we did it.
All right, cool. Sounds great. André, that brings an end to our time here together on Front Row Rugby. I just want to say thank you very much for being available, and it would be lovely to have you on again in the future.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for the invite, and great being on your show.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed that video, why not tackle the like button? You can also subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any content from Front Row Rugby. See you next time.
Front Row Rugby. Interviews with rugby legends with Peter Stemmet.